Well, good afternoon. Captain Patrick Worley here again. Thank you for spending a few minutes with us today to study kind of our next segment on inflation and how inflationary pressures and issues are affecting your yachting business, your proposed yachting business, or the yachting businesses again worldwide. So let's take a couple moments and talk a little bit about what if you don't buy the yacht at this time? What if you determine that prices aren't going to go up as high as I believe they're going to? The cost of materials are not going to contribute to a yacht that's going to go up as much as I think. Again, the cost of labor, higher interest rates that your manufacturer has to pay. Say if you don't believe that and you decide to perhaps leave your money in cash. Well, let's talk about how does cash inflate compared to how does a yacht inflate? Well, most of us would rather have our money in a fixed asset. One of the things you hear about now is that, well, you need to put your money in gold. You know, gold is a famous inflation hedge. Well, I disagree with that, but that's not the purpose of today's video. A house, by the way, is something. A house exists. It's there. It can be rented. It can be bought. It can be sold. It's a physical asset. And a yacht is the same way. So in some cases, if you're concerned about inflation, you might want to have a yacht, $1 million yacht, that, by the way, is also going up in value. Remember, in our last installment, we talked about used yacht prices are through the roof. Well, there's people 2 or 3 years ago that made the very uneasy decision of buying a yacht for $1 million, used it for a couple of years, maybe made some money if it was in a properly operated charter program, and they're putting it back on the market at or above the price that they paid for it. Well, they certainly didn't anticipate that. By the way, if you want a great story about that, ask me to tell you about my Ford F-350 if we ever speak here in the office some afternoon. So again, back to the point. In many cases, if you believe inflation is coming and it's coming to stay, or it's going to continue to be a problem, investing your money in an asset many times can be a great offset for that. So we discussed that a little. Here's another thing that's very important, what we call pass-through pricing. In the yachting world, we are a business that, to some extent, can pass some of these costs along. In other words, some of the problems you might be seeing in the stock market, and we're not talking about the stock market today, but there are companies that can pass their costs along, for instance, and there's companies that can't. My gardener came to me some time back and said, Mr. Worley, if I have to raise my prices based on what I'm having to pay my help at this time, and higher price for gasoline and diesel and all these other things, I'd have to add $150 a month onto the bill that I charge you every month to do your landscaping. And he said, I doubt that you would go along with that. I assured him that I would not. So that being the case, he's at about the highest price that he can pass along, even though his costs are going up dramatically. I mean, obviously McDonald's isn't going to be able to sell a Big Mac someday for $11 just because the price of their store, their restaurant, their employees, their insurance, and of course the cost of their foods have gone up dramatically. So the reason I say that is in the charter industry, if we're paying a little bit more for a captain these days and a crew, which we are, if we're paying a little bit more for diesel, which we are, if we're paying more in terms of buying booze and food and other provisions and things like that, under some circumstances, we can, this is good news, we can pass that cost along. Now, of course, there's a limit, but maybe the charter, if it's crew charter, maybe it changes from $38,000 a week, maybe it goes up to $39,500. And of course, the charter guests are expecting slightly higher prices because they're paying everything that they're paying, maybe in their own business, is going up, obviously, because of inflation as well. So again, that's something to consider. If I'm buying a yacht at this time, that's maybe a little early, maybe a little earlier than I wanted to, but I want to get a good price, I want to get a good value, I want to build equity in my yacht. I want to get a better interest rate now than I think I'll have in a year from now. But how well is my yacht going to do in charter? Well, let's take a moment. Ostensibly, we have three basic charter programs.